Mary Anderson was 31 years old and currently a senior manager at a tech company in Seattle. Her job demanded absolute focus and a strong will, something she had been building for over 10 years since graduating from college. She hadn't been born into a wealthy family, but she had grown up believing that if she wanted respect, she would have to work twice as hard as everyone else. She had spent sleepless nights studying in a tiny rental room just to win a full scholarship. She had to choose between buying textbooks or dinner. But in the end, all that effort earned her a solid position at an age when many were still trying to figure things out. At work, she was the one her boss trusted with high-stakes projects. Her colleagues respected her decisiveness and resilience. Her team called her Steel Mary, not because she was cold, but because she was clear, fair, and never let emotions interfere with work. But beneath that tough shell, she knew she was still just a woman who wanted to be loved, cared for, and have someone's hand to hold after a long, draining day. She'd had a few relationships in the past, but they had all ended quickly. Partly because she was always busy, and partly because some men couldn't handle dating someone with higher income or status. One had even told her to her face, "You make me feel like less of a man." She laughed it off, but that night she sat in front of the mirror for a long time. She didn't know what she was doing wrong. Then one early spring evening, with the cold Seattle rain still falling, her close friend Naomi invited her to her husband's birthday party. Mary didn't want to go. She was exhausted from back-to-back meetings, and squeezing into a crowd of strangers had never been her thing. But Naomi had begged, "Please, just an hour. You're my bridesmaid. Don't say no like that." Mary reluctantly agreed. And that's where she met Jacob. He wasn't the kind of man who swept people off their feet at first sight. He didn't stand out, didn't talk much, and didn't try to impress. But his smile, gentle and genuine, put her strangely at ease. "You're Mary, right?" he asked, approaching as she stood alone with a glass of wine, gazing into the distance. She nodded slightly. "How did you know?" "Naomi told me that if I saw a beautiful woman standing alone looking like she regrets showing up, that's definitely you." Mary burst out laughing for the first time in weeks. They talked the whole night. It felt effortless, honest, and straightforward. He worked in HR consulting, was her age, and had also been through a few failed relationships. They shared life perspectives, told each other random things, and eventually exchanged numbers. She didn't overthink it at the time. She just felt light. Then Jacob started reaching out. Morning texts, checking in after her long meetings, sending cute dog videos, just because he knew she had a golden retriever when she was little. She began looking forward to his messages. And after 2 months of getting to know each other, he told her he wanted something serious. Mary didn't believe in fairy tales, but when Jacob said, "I don't care if you're more successful, make more money, or come home late from work. I just need to know if you're happy with me," her heart stirred in a very real way. She said yes. And a year later, they got married. She thought happiness had finally found her. But she was wrong. So wrong. Their wedding was simple and warm, held in a small garden north of Seattle, where they had their first date under the drizzling March rain. It wasn't glamorous like the stuff of dreams, but to her, that moment was enough, because the man standing beside her had held her hand through some of life's toughest days. Jacob's parents, Jonathan and Victoria, surprised her at first with how open and kind they were. Victoria gave her a hand-knit shawl, saying, "Just a little gift for a daughter-in-law who works in an office. It's easy to get chilly." Jonathan would joke around with Jacob in front of her, saying, "The boy is lucky to marry such a smart and strong woman." She laughed a lot at those family dinners. She even thought maybe she really did get lucky. After the wedding, Jacob moved into her 2-bedroom condo in the city, close to work, near a park, and just a 15-minute drive from her office. Married life felt peaceful in the beginning. They split house chores, cooked together on weekends, and every night before bed, Jacob would place a hand on her forehead and whisper, "Good night, my wife." Then one October evening, just after she returned from a client meeting in Portland, Jacob said slowly, "There's something I want to talk to you about. My parents." She sat on the couch and slipped off her heels, her feet sore from the day. "What's going on?" "My parents' health hasn't been great. Dad has high blood pressure, and Mom's getting forgetful. I'm really worried." She nodded. "Yeah, I get that. But we don't exactly live close." Jacob paused, then said something that made her freeze. "I want us to move in with them, or at least convert their old house into a duplex." She looked up. You mean fully move in, or just live nearby? Make it a duplex. Their house is big, has a backyard and a solid foundation. If we renovate, we'd have our own space, and still be close enough to care for them. I already talked to a friend in construction. It'd cost around 100 grand. She let out a breath longer than she intended. It wasn't about being selfish. She understood children had responsibilities. But the thought of giving up their independent life to live right next door to her in-laws, even with a wall between them, made her uneasy. Jacob saw that. I know what you're thinking, but I promise no one's expecting you to play the traditional daughter-in-law. My parents are easygoing. They really like you. She didn't respond right away. She asked for time to think. And for the next week, she carried that question around like a small pebble in her shoe. Barely noticeable, but impossible to ignore. Finally, one Friday night after dinner with his parents, she said yes. Victoria's eyes welled up. Thank you, Mary. I know this isn't easy for you. Mary smiled, but something inside her tugged, soft and nameless. A few weeks later, Mary and Jacob started working with the construction team he knew. They designed 2 separate living spaces connected by a shared hallway with a lockable door. From the outside, it looked like a townhome. Inside, it was 2 different worlds. Jacob was excited, choosing tiles, wall colors, and garden plans. Mary, on the other hand, started to feel like she was stepping into a project that she wasn't fully in control of. She was included in the conversations, but big decisions like taking out loans or selecting materials seemed to come more from him and his parents. One evening, while she was reviewing the detailed budget sheet, she asked, "Babe, so how are we splitting the $100,000 cost between both sides?" Jacob looked a little caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I just want to know the breakdown. How much are we paying, and how much are your parents paying?" Jacob was silent. A long, very long pause passed before he spoke softly. "I was hoping you could front the money for now. My parents are going through a bit of financial trouble." She sat upright. "Are you saying I'm covering everything?" He held her hand. "Not everything. Just helping for now. I'll pay you back over time." She didn't say anything more, but inside her, a door quietly creaked open, and behind it wasn't light. She didn't yet realize that door would lead her to a truth. One that would shatter everything she believed about the word family. One weekend evening, when the renovation plans were nearly finalized and the workers had started laying the foundation, she decided to sit down with Jacob to go over the financials more clearly. Up to that point, she had fronted nearly all the initial costs: design fees, construction deposits, and material down payments. She wasn't the type to nickel and dime, but she didn't like being kept in the dark either. "Jacob, can you show me the total costs and the budget breakdown? I need to keep track of everything I'm paying." He looked at her and scratched his head. "Yeah, I'll check. But Mary, there's something I should probably tell you first." She looked up, her heart slowing like she had just stepped into a sudden draft of cold air. "My parents, they're actually in some debt," he said slowly. "It's not massive, but it's significant." "How much?" "About $140,000. She nearly dropped the glass in her hand. "Say that again," she said, trying to stay calm. $140,000 for what?" "Dad invested in a coffee shop chain a while ago, but it didn't work out. Then he took out another loan to pay off the old one. It just kept rolling over. And I'm only finding out about this when the house is almost built." He avoided her gaze. "I wasn't trying to hide it. I just thought I could handle it. But now it's all piling up. If we don't do something soon, they might lose the house." She was silent. A flood of numbers and what-ifs hit her all at once. She had already spent close to $85,000 on the renovation, and now this debt. She was in too deep. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice dropping. Jacob took her hand. "I know this is a big ask, but can you help my parents? You're the only one who can save them right now. And what about you? I'll pay you back. I promise." She gave a faint smile. Not because she was happy, but because in that moment she realized she wasn't just a wife. She was being treated like a financial solution. But she still loved Jacob, or she thought she did. And so she said yes. She pulled $70,000 from her savings and transferred it to cover the bulk of his parents' debt. The rest she scheduled in monthly installments of $5,000. Every payment was documented with receipts and transaction records. Victoria called her crying as she thanked her. Jonathan even emailed her a handwritten letter, calling her a blessing this family was lucky to have. She used to believe that. But over time, little things began to feel off. Jacob stopped contributing financially. The "I'll pay you back" never happened. Every time she brought it up, there was an excuse: delayed paycheck, funds tied up in a project. When she asked to see his pay stub to rework their budget, he snapped. "You don't trust me? Why does it always come back to money, Mary?" She didn't answer. She was tired, but she kept paying. A year later, after she made the 13th payment, Victoria called, cheerful. "You're amazing. Almost done in just a year. Honestly, if it weren't for you, we'd be out on the street." She asked, "How much is left now?" "Just around $25,000, sweetie. You really are this family's savior." She hung up, frozen. 13 months, and she had spent nearly $120,000. No contract. No legal paperwork. Just trust. Then one night, she came home early from work because a meeting got canceled. She froze outside the living room door. Laughter spilled from inside. Jonathan's voice said, "Got to hand it to Jacob. He found himself a wife who not only brings in the money, but knows her place." Victoria chimed in. "The debt's nearly paid off. House is renovated. That girl's a diamond in the rough." Then Jacob, with a hint of sarcasm, said, "Yeah, but once it's all done, maybe I should cut her loose. Sooner or later, she's going to start asking questions." She didn't know how long she stood there, clutching her purse, her heart pounding so loud she couldn't hear. But she knew one thing. This wasn't a life she was building. She was the target of a plan set in motion long before she ever said, "I do." From that night on, she was no longer the same Mary who laughed over dinner, who believed in warm hugs and silent forgiveness. She didn't scream. She didn't confront. Instead, she turned quiet, like a calm surface hiding a storm building deep below. She kept paying on time. No reminders. $5,000 a month from her savings and paycheck to cover the debt. On top of that, renovation bills kept trickling in like a cruel chorus on repeat. Tile invoices, painter fees, new window installations for the shared living area. All of it on her. Jacob's smile never changed. Every evening, he'd ask what she wanted for dinner. He would occasionally hug her from behind while she was cooking, rest his chin on her shoulder, and whisper, "Thank you, Mary. I know you're doing so much for this family." She would nod, but inside she felt nothing. She began digging into Jacob's finances. One Saturday afternoon, while he was watching football with Jonathan, she quietly opened her laptop and searched for any record of income he had ever shared with her, which she suddenly realized he never had. Since the day they got married, she had never once seen a real pay stub. The last time she asked about it, he put his coffee cup down and said, irritated, "Why do you think I'm hiding something? You already know I don't make much. Are you accusing me now?" She didn't tell him that she wasn't just suspicious. She knew something was wrong. But without proof, she stayed silent. She kept contributing, kept covering everything. By that point, she had poured more than $110,000 into the house and his family. Nearly all the money she had saved over the last 6 years. And yet, strangely, Jacob always had money for other things. A new pair of limited edition sneakers, the latest smartphone just weeks after release, a weekend fishing trip with brand new gear. She didn't know where he was getting the money, but it wasn't from her. One time, she gently asked, "Could you be more transparent about our finances so we can manage things together? Because right now I'm covering everything." Jacob paused for a few seconds, then said, "You're doing it because you're good at it, not because I asked you to. If it feels like too much, then don't do it. I'm not forcing you." She gave a dry smile. The kind of smile only a woman who realizes she's being used can master. Not loud, not angry, just the smile of someone who is no longer naive. She didn't ask again after that. She also stopped sharing account numbers or balances, but she started documenting every debt payment, every material invoice, every bank transfer, every message Jacob sent asking her to help. Just one more time. She didn't know what she'd use it all for, but she knew one day she would. Her in-laws still acted like they adored her, still called her the little angel of the family, still brought her their homemade apple pie on weekends, as if she wasn't the one single-handedly carrying the debt they created. They didn't know she had overheard that conversation that night. They didn't know their words, from "she earns money like water" to "once the house is done it'll be easy to cut her loose," echoed in her head every time she opened her wallet. Jacob still thought she believed in him, and she let him think so because she'd learned a strong woman doesn't need to scream to prove her power. Sometimes, silence is the foundation of a perfectly calculated counterstrike. She didn't know exactly when this would end, but she knew one thing. The next time she spent money, it wouldn't be to pay off debt. It would be to buy back her freedom. One rainy Wednesday afternoon, typical Seattle weather, she got out of a sudden meeting with Korean partners and headed home 3 hours earlier than expected. She thought she'd swing by her favorite bakery for some chestnut cookies, then head home and cook dinner for Jacob, something she hadn't done in a while because of work. As she turned into their street, she noticed Jonathan's silver SUV already parked in the garage. Odd, since it wasn't Sunday. They usually only visited on Sundays. She quietly opened the door, leaving the hallway light off. Raindrops dripped from her hair, but she didn't notice. Laughter and voices floated in from the living room. "That girl really is a goldmine, Jacob." Victoria's voice rang out, sharp like shattered glass. "Remember the first time I met Mary? I couldn't believe she was the kind of woman who'd be so easy to reel in." Jonathan chuckled. Then Jacob chimed in. "It's simple. Just act like you care. Say a few sweet things. Women like her. Tough on the outside, but always craving love deep down. Am I right?" "Totally," a woman's unfamiliar voice added. "I'm still shocked she bought into it so easily. This house is practically hers now. Most of the debt's paid. Just stretch it out a few more months and done." She froze. The air thickened like someone had filled every crack with glue. She didn't know how long she stood there, just that her hand was gripping her bag, so tight her knuckles went white. Then she did the first thing that came to mind. She turned around and walked out as if she'd never come home. That night, she texted Jacob saying she had to stay at a hotel due to visiting international clients. He replied with one line. "Stay safe. Love you." She stared at the message, didn't reply. Inside, everything shattered. But from those shards, she began piecing together a plan. She didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't explode like some drama scene. She hit record. The next time she came home, she brought a tiny recorder tucked into her coat pocket. She acted tired, buried in work, as if she didn't notice that night's dinner included a new woman. Introduced as a business associate, she smiled, poured wine, made small talk. But inside, she was capturing every glance, every fake smile. She also quietly compiled a complete breakdown of their financial history. Every dollar she had spent over 2 years of marriage. Renovation, debt payments, living expenses. All of it logged in a confidential file. She sent a copy to her attorney with a note. "Do nothing, just keep this." Then she began the process of transferring the house into her name. Initially, for the sake of transparency, she had suggested they be co-owners. But now, she had someone handle the transfer of Jacob's share to her under the pretense of property tax optimization. He signed without a second thought. And then a week later, she pretended to be the old Mary again. The tired wife, still cooking, still asking about his day, still loving. Meanwhile, she was counting down to the perfect reveal. They had no idea she'd quietly filed for divorce. No idea she had purchased the remaining debt under special terms, making her their new creditor. No idea that the soft-hearted girl they planned to discard now held every card. And when the time came to expose the truth, she wouldn't yell. She'd simply open the door and invite them out of her life one by one. Not with bitterness, but with proof born from their own lies. She used to think she was a rational woman. Smart, grounded, immune to emotional damage. But when your heart is manipulated so subtly, you learn. The deepest wounds aren't caused by blunt force. They come from small cuts, repeated quietly every single day. She kept playing her role. The devoted wife, the ideal daughter-in-law. She kept smiling when Jacob hugged her from behind. Kept nodding when her mother-in-law called her the family's pride. She even increased the monthly payments to pay off their debt faster, just so they'd believe she still trusted them. They didn't realize those were the last dollars she would ever give them. Not out of love, but out of contempt, carefully wrapped in calm. In the 18th month of her steady payments, she called the bank holding most of Jonathan and Victoria's debt. As the original guarantor, she offered to settle the remaining balance in one lump sum in exchange for full assignment of the debt to her name. It didn't take long. They happily agreed. From that moment on, she, Mary Anderson, was officially the holder of her in-laws' debt note. 1 week later, Mary completed the paperwork to transfer full ownership of the renovated house, where the whole family now lived, into her name. Jacob didn't question anything when she told him it was for new state tax processing. He signed the documents with a half smile and a distracted look in his eyes. She remembered that moment so clearly. Only one sentence echoed in her mind. "Thank you, Jacob. You just handed me the key to end all of this." Quietly, she began working with her personal attorney, filing for divorce in King County, with every detail kept strictly confidential. During that time, she gathered all the necessary evidence: bank statements, receipts, emails, and especially the audio recording from the night she accidentally overheard their plan to discard her. Her lawyer, Stacy Weston, a sharp and composed woman in her 50s, looked at her after their first meeting and said, "If I were you, I wouldn't get angry. I'd wait. And when everything's ready, I'd press the button. Right time, right target." Mary responded only with a thin, emotionless smile. The night before everything was revealed, she cooked as usual. Jacob's favorite lasagna, a salad for her mother-in-law, and lemon butter cake for Jonathan. She even poured the wine and raised a toast to finally almost being done with the debt. Jacob beamed, eyes shining. "I can't believe you pulled this off, Mary. Really, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." She lightly tapped his glass and looked at him deeply. "I think so too, Jacob. Thank you for showing me your true self so early on." He didn't understand what she meant, but she did, and she didn't rush to explain. The next morning, she woke up early and left the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, along with a copy of the official debt transfer naming her as the new creditor of Jonathan and Victoria. She left a short note. "Good luck negotiating with your new lender. I have no intention of being generous." She walked out of that house and moved into a small penthouse apartment she had secretly purchased using profits from a private investment she'd been nurturing for the past 3 years. The place overlooked Elliott Bay, where the sunrise reflected on the water every morning. A reminder that peace isn't something granted, but something you take back with your own hands. That afternoon, her attorney sent formal notices to Jacob and his parents. They had 3 choices: repay the remaining debt in full within 60 days, vacate the house immediately, granting her full control, face legal action for failure to comply. She didn't stick around to see their reaction. She already knew some relationships weren't worth saving. Letting go at the right time was far better than letting trust rot into something broken. The only thing she regretted was not realizing sooner that sometimes forgiveness isn't noble. It's just weakness in a moral disguise. She thought she had made the clean break, that she had the upper hand when she left the divorce papers and walked away from that house in silence. But she forgot one thing. People who survive off others will always fight back in the ugliest ways when they feel threatened. Just 3 days after the divorce paperwork was submitted, Jacob texted her asking to meet and talk things out. She declined. She told him all communication should go through legal channels. He didn't reply. She thought that was the end of it. But that Saturday morning, as she was getting ready for an investment seminar downtown, she got a call from her property manager, Mr. Wallace. His voice was urgent. "Mary, I'm sorry to bother you this early. Someone just changed the locks at the Lakeview property and claimed you no longer own it. I just got a call saying a woman has moved in with Jacob." She froze. Without waiting another second, she drove straight to the old house. The house she renovated with her own money. She had handpicked every tile and chandelier. The gate had a new lock, but she had a spare key from the original set. She had already filed the ownership transfer documents with every local authority the moment they were finalized. She rang the bell. The one who opened the door was Jacob, wearing the white dress shirt she gave him for his birthday 2 years ago. But this time, he didn't greet her barefoot at the door like he used to. He stood in the doorway, calm and steady. "Mary, I think it's better if you go back to your new apartment. This isn't your house anymore." She looked at him and said nothing. Behind him, she saw a young woman with loosely curled hair walk out of the kitchen, holding a glass of orange juice. The woman smiled, like Mary was some uninvited guest. "That's my new girlfriend," Jacob said, like he was announcing a new pair of shoes. She stayed silent. "Oh, and one more thing," he added. "My parents think you could still live here if you agree to a few conditions." She raised an eyebrow. "Conditions?" "Yeah, you can stay here, but you'll need to pay rent. And since the house is more crowded now, it'd be great if you could handle cleaning, laundry, and cooking." She laughed. A long, unrestrained laugh. Jacob took a half step back, probably caught off guard. "You're telling me I have to pay rent and do chores in a house that's legally mine?" Jacob shrugged. "Well, you kind of moved out. I just rearranged things a little." She pulled her phone from her pocket and quickly dialed a familiar number. "Hi, Stacy. It's me," she said when the line connected. "Get ready to file for trespassing, unlawful occupancy, and violation of property ownership. Yes, the entire ex-in-law family. Starting today." She looked Jacob dead in the eyes. No softness left. "You have 3 hours to pack up and leave my house with your girlfriend and your parents. If not, the police will be here before lunch." His face went pale. "You can't do this, Mary. We were married." "Were," she emphasized the word. "And you ended that," she said. "I'm sorry, but didn't you say you still loved me? You once told me." "I've said a lot of things," she cut in, "but I never said I was stupid." She turned and walked toward the gate, feeling lighter than she had in 2 years. It was like setting down a 100-pound weight. Jacob didn't follow her. He knew it was over. And she knew this wasn't revenge. It was justice. And in a world where women like her were labeled too strong to be loved, this wasn't just a statement to Jacob, but to everyone who ever thought her independence was something to be exploited. 3 days after that confrontation at the old house, her lawyer personally sent a formal demand letter to Jacob and his family. It clearly stated 3 points. The Lakeview property was legally under her name, fully registered with King County's property records. They were unlawfully occupying it, and if they didn't vacate within 7 days, she would file a civil suit for eviction. The remaining debt, over $60,000, hadn't been paid off. It was only deferred because of bank negotiations. From that point forward, Jonathan and Victoria were fully liable since they were the original borrowers. Stacy attached all the necessary documents: bank statements, financial guarantees, the debt transfer contract, and supporting evidence. Every detail was covered. That afternoon, Jacob called her 5 times. She didn't answer. He texted, "I know you're angry, but we can work this out without turning it into a war." She replied with just one line, "Let your lawyer talk to mine." She also filed a civil suit against Jacob and his girlfriend, the woman she had seen in her kitchen that day. The charges were adultery and breach of marital ethics. In Washington, adultery doesn't directly affect divorce rulings, but if there's financial harm and solid evidence, the guilty party can still be held accountable under civil law, including alimony. She had everything: recordings, photos, texts, and even a statement from a delivery worker who had seen the woman coming and going while she was away. Stacy filed a compensation claim for $75,000. This included emotional distress, personal property damage, and legal expenses. But it didn't stop there. She also filed to recover the $60,000 she had paid during renovations and debt repayments. She included the transfer receipts and a handwritten IOU Jacob had begged her to sign when he first asked for help. They were cornered. What used to be a loose cover was now a full picture, painted in betrayal and covered with fake smiles. Jacob finally showed up at the first mediation. Gone was his smug confidence. He looked tired, pale, and tense. He looked at her and said quietly, "I know I messed up, but Mary, if you push this, I'll lose everything." She replied coolly, "You bet everything. The moment you betrayed me, losing it wasn't my doing. It was yours." His girlfriend didn't show up for the hearing, but through her lawyer, she sent a settlement offer. She was willing to pay part of the damages if her name stayed confidential in court. Mary accepted, not because she forgave her, but because she knew the strongest blow doesn't come from shouting. It comes in silence. And she wasn't done playing her endgame. As for her ex-in-laws, after receiving the demand letter, they called her in tears. They pleaded and acted like victims. Jonathan choked out, "Mary, you were once our daughter-in-law. Do you really want to destroy this family?" She cut him off. Her voice was calm. "I'm not destroying anything. Your family just assumed I didn't know how to fight back. Now I'm simply taking what's rightfully mine." They fell silent. She knew people like them, those who never admit fault, only learn through loss. But she wasn't waiting for them to change. She didn't need them to. Her life had already moved on to a new chapter, one where she held the wheel, and no one could take it from her again. Jacob and everyone on his side had become nothing more than side characters in a story she had already removed from her life. She never thought she'd sign papers to sell the house that once felt like her home, the place where she poured so much time, money, and emotion. But she finally understood. No matter how beautiful a house may be, it's just 4 walls if all it holds is lies and manipulation. The Lakeview property was reappraised after the renovations. With the real estate market booming, she received an offer just 1 month after listing. A young couple offered $200,000, exactly what she had hoped for. They loved the dual-space layout, especially the kitchen she had redesigned from scratch. After deducting the renovation and personal investment costs, she walked away with a net profit of over $40,000. Not a huge amount, considering the time and pain it had cost her, but more than enough to mark a fresh start, one free from old memories. During divorce mediation, the court approved her claim for alimony compensation. Jacob was ordered to pay $35,000 over 12 months. The girlfriend, even though she tried to play down her role, had to pay $150 to keep her name out of public court records. Jonathan's family, under legal pressure, paid back the $60,000 she had covered. Not because they wanted to, but because they didn't want to get sued for breaking signed financial agreements. All in all, Mary recovered over $150,000 between the house sale and the settlements. But the most valuable thing she gained wasn't in dollars. After the storm, she started taking investing seriously. She used to think saving was enough. Now she knew modern women needed more than just a stable income. They needed sharp financial minds. She enrolled in a personal wealth management course, hired an independent advisor, and learned to read markets. Not with emotion, but with data. Slowly, the pain lost its grip on her. She realized she could shape a better future on her own, without a crutch, without needing love to feel whole. One autumn afternoon, she stood on the balcony of her new apartment, overlooking the Seattle waterfront. The sunset spilled golden honey across the sky, and it hit her. She was living the life the old Mary once dreamed of, but never believed she deserved. She no longer kept in touch with Jacob. She didn't care whether he and that woman were still together. That wasn't her story anymore. She had closed that book, not torn it up, not denied it, but left it exactly where it belonged, the past. Her parents, who once didn't understand why she chose someone like Jacob, were now closer to her than ever. They never said, "You were right," but the look in her mother's eyes when she visited her new place said enough. Her father, always the quiet type, just patted her shoulder and said, "You're stronger than I ever imagined." She smiled. She didn't need the words. She already knew she wasn't the same Mary anymore. She was Mary, the woman once seen as easy to use because she loved too hard. But now, she loved herself more than anyone else ever could. She hadn't shut the world out, but she did choose carefully who she let in. Not out of fear, but because she had learned not everyone who gets close is there to lift you up. Some are just there to take what they can. And if anyone asked her whether she regretted loving Jacob, she would say no. Because without him, she wouldn't have learned where her limits were. She wouldn't have known how far she could go once she let go. And most importantly, she would never have discovered that sometimes, the thing we most need to let go of is the very thing we once thought we couldn't live without. But she had lived. And now, she was living better than ever. Mary's story was powerful proof that love doesn't always return loyalty. But learning to love wisely, and especially to love yourself, is what matters most. After the pain, she not only reclaimed justice, but came out smarter, stronger, and more grounded. She refused to let heartbreak define her, and instead, she used it to build a life she finally deserved.